this video, I'm going to show you how to make this very simple animal walking down the road, popping out of a phone composite effect in Photoshop. It's probably actually harder to say than it is to do. All right, so for this basic effect, you need three things. You need a background image that has some sort of road or train track or, something that kind of pops out in like a lane like this. Then you need your animal or whatever you're going to put on the road, and then a phone. So let's start by bringing the animal, clicking and dragging it and bringing it over to our image and letting go and dropping it in. If you need to resize your image, just go Control T and then drag from the corners here to resize to what you want. So I'm just going to go about like that and then hit check. Now we have to separate our subject from the original background, so cut it out. The easiest way to do that, especially now, is the 1, 2, 3, fourth one down here. Click, and it's the quick selection tool. If you don't see it, just right click, and it'll be right here. And we're just going to use this up here called Select Subject. So when you click it, Photoshop does a pretty good job, as you can see, of selecting your subject. And we're going to clean up maybe some of this stuff in here. So if you want to get rid of some stuff, you go to this minus up there, and we can just kind of go in like this and take some of that out. And there's a little bit right here that we want to take away. And like, let's say right there where I kind of notched in on the tusks now, go back to the plus and just kind of add it back in. So just kind of go back and forth until you get your selection pretty good. Then go up here and go to select and mask. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time in here. Any kind of fixes that I like to do, I tend to do on the mask afterwards. So I'm just going to shift my radius a little bit. I'm going to smooth it out a little bit, and then I'm going to shift my edge back a little bit. And I'm going to live with whatever that gives me for now. It looks pretty good. And then I'm going to scroll down here and go from output to, and I'm going to switch it to a layer mask and click OK. And now if you still have bits that are problematic, like down here, like it's a little bit bumpy, or maybe this edge is like too sharp, I like to just go on my mask and then I'll go to my brush tool. And if I need to take things away, I'll use black. If I need to add things back, I'll use white. So with black here, I'll make my brush, a little bit bigger for now. So maybe something like that, a little bit bigger. And my hardness, I'll keep around like 80. And all I'm going to do is kind of just go along the edge here, and with black, just kind of smooth out some of these edges here. Some of the ones that are just too sharp that kind of look fake. I'm just going to whoops, that's too much. So if you do that, then just go to white, and white will bring it back like that. So just keep flipping back and forth. When you're happy with your selection, just go to your move tool and just place it to where you think you want it. So I'm going to go about right there. And then we're going to bring in our phone. So just click on your phone like we did the other time, drag it over and let go. The first thing I'm going to do is get rid of this background. So I'm going to go over here, right click, and go to the magic wand tool and just click on these checkers. Then I'm going to go select inverse, and I'm going to zoom in, and then I'm going to go right click and go back to that quick selection tool, which gives me these plus minus things again. And then just go through the same process that you did with your main subject until your selection looks good, and then click select and mask. And then this time we are not really going to do anything but maybe shift our edge back just a little tiny bit. That's about it. And then change this again to layer mask and click OK. So now if we zoom out, now we're ready to resize this phone. So I'm going to go Control T, and all that I'm looking for here is to line up this corner of the phone and this corner of the phone with the edges of the road or train track or whatever you have. So I'm going to line it up there on that side, and then just keep expanding it out, and something like that, maybe a little bit smaller, and bring it in so it lines up with the road, kind of like that. And then click check. Then you're going to bring your subject, your animal, above the phone so it kind of goes like there. And then all we're going to do is click on the mask of the phone, go back to our brush, go to a black brush. And then for the size, make it a fairly large brush. And the hardness somewhere around like 60%. Something like that is probably good. And all we're going to do is just paint over all the bits here that are overlapping with the road. So the only time you have to be careful is just kind of along the edge right here where the road and the phone/hand kind of overlap. Just try and find that edge, especially right where the phone is right there. The rest of it, even if you go past a little bit, like I went past a little bit like that, you can just flip back to white and easily just kind of paint that back in so they kind of blend in with each other. At this point, we're ready to put on all of our finishing touches, starting with the shadow down here. Now, for me, I'm not the greatest at shadows, but I know something that works for me, which is I'm going to click a new layer that's right below my subject. And actually, I'm going to put 2. And each of these is going to be just for my 2 feet right here. So on this first one, I'm going to go to my brush. I'm going to make it a black brush. I'm going to make it very blurry, like hardness right down. And I'm going to try and make the size about the size of my foot. So I'm going to try like 600, something like that. And I'm just going to pretty harshly paint in a few blotches like that. Then I'm going to go to the other one and do the same thing for this foot. Now this foot is kind of hovering a little bit, so I'm going to put it a little bit back, like maybe there and like one right there. And that's good enough for now for what we need for the paint, but we're going to mess with it a little bit. So let's start with the first one that we did. We're going to go up to Filter, Blur, and Gaussian Blur. And I'm just going to, that looks pretty good, just blur it out a little bit, something like that, and click OK. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing for the other foot. Next, I'm going to free transform a little bit, so Control T and kind of squash this. Oh, you want to make sure that this is unchecked up here so that you can squash it down and kind of move it into place. So I don't need it to be as like wide, and then just use your arrow key to kind of nudge it into place where you think it looks the best. So I think that looks pretty good right there. And then obviously, once again, do the same thing for the other foot. The last 2 things you're going to want to do for your foot shadows is mess around with the opacity a little bit. So just slide it along until you kind of get the look that you like for both of them. And then you want to touch up the edges. So you can see here that there's kind of this little like fringe around the edge of the feet, which makes the shadow look a little bit more fake. So what you're going to want to do is click on your mask, go back to your black brush and shrink it down a little bit, maybe like that, and make sure the hardness is around like 75 again, something like that, and just go along the edge and kind of try and get rid of some of that fringe. So this one has the fringe right here too. And then for like little spots like this, just crank down your brush size and your hardness, and then zoom in even further to kind of touch up those little spots right there. And then if it still doesn't look right, adjust the opacity and scale of your shadows even more. And then to add more of a shadow, click on your subject layer and double click over here. And we're going to go down here to drop shadow. Click on the word drop shadow, not on the box. And it doesn't really matter what you have up here. Just make sure your size is kind of somewhere in the middle and the opacity is, somewhere up high like there, and click OK. And then when drop shadow appears here, you can see it in the background there, but you're going to right click on it and then go create layer and click OK. And that's going to make its own layer right here. Click on it. And then again, we're going to go Control T and we're going to squash this one. Now, if you have in your image, you have a very clear what direction that the sun is going, then you're going to want to slant this in, in the opposite direction of the sun. I don't really have that in my image, so I'm going to actually flip mine forward a bit like this and then tuck it underneath so that maybe the sun is coming from directly above, maybe in this case. And I'm going to click check. Then I'm going to go back up to filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and this one I'm going to blur more again, kind of like that. And I'm just going to lower the opacity on this one. So something like that maybe. And we are good with the shadow. The next thing we're going to do is try and match the kind of color, tone, and contrast of the elephant to the background. So if I get rid of it, you can see kind of that's what the background was, and kind of over here. And the elephant is definitely a lot more green. So if we go back here and put the elephant back, and make sure you select it on this top subject layer, then go down to adjustments right here, your adjustment layers, and add a color balance. Now before we do anything with the color balance, make sure you click this right here, and that makes it a clipping mask, and that means it only is going to affect this layer directly below it. And all we're going to do is kind of shift these. So I think I need to add maybe a little bit of red, maybe a little bit of like magenta back in to kind of the mid-tone, so that kind of makes it look like it fits a little bit more. You can try different things here, like try in the shadows. Maybe in the shadows I need, a little bit of, blue, maybe it's yellow, I'm not sure here. So you want to kind of just play around. There we go. So that looks a little bit better. So you just play around to see if you can match your subject a little bit better with your background. To me, the hand doesn't really matter as much because it's really not part of this image, and it's supposed to kind of stick out a little bit as the kind of odd thing in the image. The second last thing we're going to do is add kind of some realistic depth of field blur to our background. So to do that, click on your background layer, add a mask to it, so this box with the circle in it, and you're going to go over to your gradient tool, click up here on this little slider thing, and just make sure you have black here and white here. If you don't have that, just click on this little down arrow and click on this one right here and click OK. Then you're just going to find a spot in your image. I want this to all be in focus here, because this kind of makes sense that this is the part that's in focus, but I want it to start getting blurry here. So I'm going to click somewhere like this, and wherever you click first is going to be blurry, and then wherever you end is going to be where the blur stops. So I'm going to end maybe like right there, and you can see that there's a little bit of gradient in the background, that whatever's here is going to be in focus, and then this part's going to start getting more blurry and blurry and blurry. So once you've done that, you got to click back on your thumbnail of your background, go up to filter, go to blur, and go to lens blur. In here, just make sure your source is on layer mask, and you're really just looking for this to be in focus and the background to be blurry. If it's not, if you have it the other way around, like let's say it's like this, then just slide this to the opposite side and it'll fix it. And then right here is the only thing we really have to worry about is radius. The more you crank this up, the more the blur is going to be, and the more you turn it down, it's going to look like your original image. So I'm going to go kind of somewhere around there and click OK. And as you can see, nothing happens. So to apply the effect, you then have to click on your mask, right click on it, and go disable layer mask. Now your background will be blurry. And then the final thing we're going to do is just kind of put an overall enhancement on our image. So click on your very top layer, hold shift, click on your very bottom layer, and then put it in a folder right here in a group. Then we're going to go Control J to duplicate the group and then hide the bottom one. That's just to make sure that if we mess with something here, we still have our original layers there. So make sure you're clicked on the visible one, the top one, and go up to Layer, and we're going to go Merge Group or Control E. That's going to put everything into one kind of image here. And then we're just going to go up to Filter. We're going to go down to Camera Raw Filter. And in here, I'm just going to show you kind of my kind of quick things that I like to apply to make kind of images or things pop a little bit. So I like to add a little bit of vibrance on it and some clarity to make kind of those the sharp parts pop out, and some texture. And then in this case, I am just going to maybe slide the temperature over kind of like that. And to me, that looks pretty good. You can also mess with your exposure and contrast and stuff if yours is too bright or too dark or whatever, and click OK. And there we go. That is the final composite. For the Raptors one, the only thing that I did that was different was I added a Raptors logo in the background here and We the North right here on the ground, and I did a better job on my shadow, I think. So let's take a look at the logo first. So when I cut this out originally and started putting blending modes on it here, I didn't really like what I was seeing. So maybe some of these were okay back there, but what I ended up having to do was I liked hue the best, but with a color overlay that when you double click on it, color overlay, I just made a red color overlay, and then with hue it made the look that I wanted. Then I put a little bit of blur on it as well, so it wasn't so sharp. And then the last thing that I did was obviously adjust my opacity. So this is what it looked like at 100, and I dropped it all the way down to 21. For We the North down here, all I did was use blend if. So to do that, just double click on the right of your layer, which brings up the layer style menu, and you can find blend if right here. And you can see where I moved all these sliders around. So I'm going to put them all kind of back to where they started so you can see what it looked like. So that was the original look. And then all I did was you hold Alt and then you click on these and you slide them over. And each of these does kind of a different thing. So this is taking away the black around the outside. This one right here is just going to take away some of the white on that one. So I just took a little bit away. And then this is where the real stuff happens. So when I click here and I slide this, you can see some of the lines from underneath are now showing through. And then on this side, you'll see some of the highlights. Anything that's kind of like a bright spot will kind of shine through there. And that's pretty much all I did, was I just adjusted these to get to the look that I wanted and click OK. Oh, and I obviously used a different phone that's slanted in a different direction as well. If you got something out of this video, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing, and I will catch you next time.